All righty. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Titan Talk, Artificial Intelligence, Panic or Promise with Tom Wetzel. I am so excited to have Tom as this month's speaker. He is so very knowledgeable about the insurance industry, and he has really become an expert on artificial intelligence's use within the insurance industry. It's just such a topic that is so relevant to right now, and I'm just very excited and happy that he agreed to share that knowledge with us. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. You are viewing today's webinar as an audience member, and therefore you do not have the ability to turn on your video or your microphone. Questions are encouraged, and they can be submitted through the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your screen. And then there will be dedicated time at the end of the presentation to answer any questions. Tom has also graciously included his email at the end of the presentation, should you have further questions that you would like to send to him directly. If you have a technical issue, you can reach out to our Office of Alumni Engagement at 309-556-3145 or by email to iwualum@iwu.edu. A recording of today's webinar will be available to view on the Office of Alumni Engagement YouTube page, and you will also be sent a link and a short survey tomorrow afternoon in your email. At this time, I'm so pleased to introduce Tom Wetzel, class of 1972. Tom is nationally known as a marketing consultant, journalist, and educator in the insurance industry, and his passion for journalism took root right here at Wesleyan, where he served as the Argus editor for 2 years. And under his leadership, they earned numerous national awards for journalism excellence. Tom, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kaylee. And thanks to all of you who have registered to sign in. And as she indicated, my experience is insurance. However, I will be talking about artificial intelligence from a broader perspective as well. So even if you're not in the industry, you're going to get something out of this presentation. And that's certainly my hope. Artificial intelligence isn't new. The insurance industry has long used artificial intelligence to streamline processes such as underwriting and claims. And every industry and profession is using AI tools to some degree today. This new generation of tools, however, represents a quantum leap in capability, which will result in all sorts of disruption and possible realignments, not just in the insurance business, but across the board. That said, there's an enormous amount of hyperbole and certainty on all sides of the debate. From one side, extolling the unlimited capabilities of AI, and on the other side, predicting the end of civilization as we know it. What I want to do for the next 45 minutes, because we're going to leave a lot of time for questions, is try to explore AI from a more realistic perspective. For those who don't know me, I'm a journalist by training and conviction. I started my career as a newspaper reporter. That was at the Argus, but it was also at the Daily Panagraph. And I learned how to be a keen observer and report dispassionately on what I see and hear. For the last 40 years, however, much of my work has been inside the insurance industry, reporting on the industry and counseling large and small insurance companies and agents across the country on how they can better tell their story. For the last 10 years, I've been studying, teaching, and writing about cybersecurity and the critical role it plays for all of us. Cybersecurity has an integral connection to artificial intelligence, so my focus on AI was hardly a leap. Full disclosure, I am not a techie. I'm a good listener and I'm good at asking questions, both in the industry and out. And I've asked a lot of questions. So what you're going to hear today is a product of my own experience and my own work within the industry, but also talking to a lot of insurance company executives, a lot of agents, a lot of IT and AI experts. I want to start by sort of to a certain extent. The first is narrow artificial intelligence. Narrow AI is the type of AI we currently have. It's designed to do a specific task. It's recommending videos, translating languages, or playing a game of chess. These systems can only operate within the parameters they were programmed for and do not have the ability to or capability of applying knowledge from one domain to another. They lack the ability to understand, learn, or react outside their specific function. Examples of narrow AI include Google's search algorithm, Amazon's recommendation system, or IBM's Watson. Artificial general intelligence is a type of AI that could perform any intellectual tasks that a human being can do. But unlike narrow AI, general AI would have the ability to understand, learn, adapt, and implement knowledge across a wide range of tasks. It would have an understanding of the world in the same way as humans do, allowing it to independently perform a variety of complex tasks. It could reason, it could solve problems, it could make judgments, plan, and learn from experience. But here's the kicker. General AI is still largely a theoretical concept. We're not there yet. And when we will get there depends on two things. One is who you ask, and two, what specific capability you're talking about. You can't compare apples to oranges. The third term that I want to demystify, if you will, is large language models. That's like GPT. Another example is Google Bard, and a third is Microsoft Bing Chat. The large language models are trained to recognize patterns, an almost limitless amount of text, most of what's on the internet. These systems process any sequence of words they're given and then predict which words come next. They're a cutting-edge example of artificial intelligence, a model that's created to solve a specific problem or provide a particular service. Large language models are learning how to do that better, but they can't learn other tasks. Now let's take a look at what's happening in the insurance industry specifically. In broad strokes, companies are moving from a repair and replace model to a predict and prevent model. What that means is companies aren't just waiting for losses to happen, but taking a more proactive role to anticipate losses and then helping policyholders prevent them from happening in the first place. And why the change? The answer is really simple. It's the availability of data. More data on how and why losses occur, more data on how to prevent those losses. AI greatly increases the ability to process and analyze that data quickly and easily, which then can translate into actions to reduce the frequency and severity of those losses. To quote Insurance Information Institute CEO Sean Cavelian, the traditional risk transfer tools are no longer sufficient in many lines of insurance. Now, there are many ways that insurers are using AI today, but for the sake of brevity, here are three broad categories. The first is underwriting. AI can help insurers evaluate risk more accurately by analyzing large amounts of data, such as historical claims data, credit scores, and social media activity, thereby enabling insurers to offer personalized coverage to customers and to be able to price policies more accurately. In the claims space, algorithms can facilitate and speed up the claims handling process without human intervention. They can determine aspects of claims such as image recognition, data unification, data analysis, and predict potential costs. Algorithms typically analyze images and sensors along with the insurer's historical data, helping to speed up claim settlement. In fraud detection, AI is being used to spot patterns in claims and payouts that may signal possible fraud. which, by the way, costs the industry an estimated 308 billion, that's with a B, every year. That represents a 400% increase since 1995. I'll add a fourth to this list, and that's customer experience. It's related to claims, but in auto insurance, insurers can use AI to assess simple claims in just 6 seconds based on smartphone photos sent by the customer, compared to humans who take an average of 6 minutes. Speed is obviously very important. So what about the future? Where is the industry going? Well, first is more customization. Traditionally, insurers offer what many call lowest common denominator products, a standard off-the-shelf policy with only a minor tweak or two. What you end up with is a very undifferentiated product. You know, a bakery and a laundromat essentially have the same policy. And in today's world, that's not ideal, particularly because insurance coverages have gotten so complex. With the ability to process and analyze data more automatically, insurers will all be able to offer more customized policies, and policyholders are going to benefit, obviously, by paying for coverages they really need. AI will also enable the expansion of insurable risks. There, it's the more data and the ability to process it quickly means that insurance companies can better understand risks and price them accurately. What that also means is they can take on risks they might have declined just a few years ago because they essentially didn't understand it. Now, for those of you outside the insurance industry, this term that you see on your screen, parametric insurance, is going to be new. Parametric insurance describes a type of insurance contract that insures a policyholder against the occurrence of a specific event by paying a set amount based on the magnitude of the event, as opposed to the magnitude of the losses in a traditional indemnity policy. Example, a policy that'll pay $100,000 if an earthquake with a magnitude of 5.0 or greater occurs. This kind of contract is very attractive because it eliminates the claims adjustment process and means policyholders get their money a lot faster. United Kingdom did a study and concluded that the faster availability of funds can accelerate disaster response and de-escalate losses, and that parametric insurance can be 3.5 times as effective as delayed payments from aid. And obviously, parametric insurance is enabled in large part because the greater availability of data to make those decisions. Outside the industry, everybody on this call can think of examples of how artificial intelligence is being used. And for the sake of brevity, I only want to highlight 3. It could be just as easily 300, but we don't have time. The first one is law, and you wouldn't think, gee, how can AI help in the legal profession? Well, in fact, litigation management is important, and AI is being used to better understand and determine which cases to settle and which ones to take in the first place. And interestingly, Harvard Law School just partnered with the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society to create an initiative on artificial intelligence and the law, which is going to focus on the challenges and opportunities for the law profession created by AI. Enhancements to the speed of the legal practice, aid in effectiveness to enforcement and adjudication, and to address some societal issues: consumer protection, investor protection, false advertising, privacy, misinformation, discrimination, and civil rights. So obviously they're looking at it in a very serious way. In pharmaceuticals, in drug discovery, one of the big questions that they always deal with is how to choose the molecules that will likely have the right or wrong attributes once they get into a clinical trial setting. And it turns out that AI is helping to identify the kinds of attributes which could be problematic once those medicines are introduced into humans. In forest management, whether it's wildfire management and prevention, wildlife habitat, timber productivity and resilience, and general forestry health, AI can improve productivity and ecosystem health. So I've been talking about all the positives of artificial intelligence, and the list is very long. So why all the angst over AI? A lot of the anxiety stems from the hype, the articles we all read, and the quotes from so many quote unquote experts that I've lost count. If you talk to those who develop AI tools and those who are actually studying it in depth, there's no real consensus on the trajectory of development other than the obvious. AI is here to stay. You ask them for predictions on when AI will think or replicate true creativity, the answers range from 2 years to 100 years. And in at least one case, they said it'll never happen. But if you actually spent time working with these large language models like ChatGPT, as I have, and maybe some of you have been working with them as well, I suspect that's the case, what you quickly discover is that they're still extremely limited. And they often suffer what are called hallucinations, which is just a nice term for imagining things that don't exist. If you're a student, and if there are any students on this call or parents of students who might be thinking about whether they're going to use ChatGPT, listen up. Because if you use ChatGPT to write a term paper, you're going to be asked to cite your sources. Where did you get this information? Who are you quoting? And you can ask the system to cite those sources. And the system will quote sources, except that those sources may be wrong or manufactured out of thin air. In a widely publicized case, a New York lawyer used ChatGPT for legal research, specifically to cite previous court cases to help prove using precedent why the case for his client should move forward. The defendant's lawyers wrote to the judge to say they couldn't find several of the cases that were referenced in the brief, and it was discovered that 6 of the submitted cases appeared to be, in the judge's words, bogus judicial decisions with bogus quotes and bogus internal citations. Now, this lawyer had been practicing for many years and was simply unaware that ChatGPT could be so flawed. And he expressed great regret at having made the mistake and vowed never to use it for legal research again, and to use it only to supplement his legal research in the future without, quote, absolute verification of its authenticity. So students beware. Interestingly, a paper from Stanford and the University of California at Berkeley, they did a performance test on ChatGPT 4, which is the latest version. And they noticed that the performance had dropped rather dramatically, and even making them think maybe it's getting dumber. And the testing that they did involved widely varied tasks to make sure the platform was being given a fair assessment of its capabilities, math problems, responses to sensitive questions, generating code, and visual reasoning. And the tests showed a 97.6% accuracy in identifying prime numbers. That test was done in March of this year. They did another test testing the same thing in June, and the accuracy dropped to 2.4%. Now, it may have been more likely a formatting mistake, but nobody really knows. The question is, there are a lot of bugs in the system that need to be worked out. Again, needless to say, for students writing essays and papers, this example should be a real cautionary tale. Now, Wesleyan is addressing AI use head on and shared with me a draft of their guidelines. And I have to tell you, it's very well thought out. And without going into the details, essentially amount to this. AI is here. It can be a useful tool, but it suffers from serious weaknesses. And there will be serious consequences, not the least of which is the fact that if a student relies on AI to do all the work, there are going to be mistakes. But just as importantly, they're going to have a very limited understanding of the subject material. They're not going to be doing much learning in that if they're just either using AI to do the work that they should be doing themselves. And on top of that, there will likely be penalties of some kind. Now, aside from these weaknesses, there's also concern on how and to what extent AI will disrupt industries. That change will happen, that's not in question. This is not hypothetical. There will be disruption. There's no question. It's a question of how much. Now I'm going to throw another insurance term at you, embedded insurance. Now that's insurance that can be purchased within the commercial transaction of another product or service. Embedded insurance isn't new. If you've purchased life insurance before you go get on an airplane, that's a good example of embedded coverage. Embedded coverage could significantly disrupt the distribution system, especially in auto insurance, while creating a game of musical chairs for insurance companies. Self and assisted driving tech could divert big segments of personal and commercial auto insurance into product, professional, and/or cyber liability lines. Expansion of parametric insurance, which we just talked about, could render chunks of the traditional claims system obsolete. Resume Builder, a career site that you may be familiar with, released a survey that found nearly half of companies that using ChatGPT says it has replaced workers. The poll was of 1,000 business leaders and found that 48% of respondents say their companies have replaced workers with ChatGPT since it was introduced last November. And Challenger, Gray, and Christmas said in its May 2023 jobs research that 3,900 jobs were lost to artificial intelligence. And it's the first time the company had listed AI as a reason for job cuts. Now, this was across the board. This was not just insurance, obviously. This was all industries. But the point is, there will be job losses. But I would argue they're not going to be as serious as one might think. We'll get into that in a little bit. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about cybersecurity, which I've been talking about and writing about for years, and there's a strong connection to AI. In effect, cybersecurity and AI are really joined at the hip. Data breaches are commonplace, and no individual or business, no matter how large or small, is immune. Now on your screen, is just a sampling of the businesses that have been hit by cyber attacks over the years. And some of them are fairly well known. And we won't go into detail the particulars of each of these breaches. The point is that they expose personal information of one kind or another. And it may be very limited, but not in all cases. Unfortunately, the insurance industry isn't immune to cybercrime. And the next slide will show you the number of companies within the industry that have been hacked. Now, I've thrown in here a few of companies that are not insurance companies, but they are companies that insurance companies use as vendors. And this is a point that I make to independent agents, but also businesses in general, that we are all living in a digital ecosystem in which the vulnerabilities one can spill over into another. And if you're of a business of any kind, you're using third-party vendors to perform various tasks. And in this particular case, WordPress was hacked. And WordPress is used for literally millions of websites across the country, of all businesses of all kinds. MailChimp, very common use. LastPass is a password manager, and they've been hacked as well. Dropbox, I thought it ironic that Norton LifeLock was hacked too. Nobody is immune, and anybody who says otherwise is just, talking trash. They don't know what they're talking about. Now, the biggest problem with all of this is that now consumers are becoming painfully aware of the dangers of data hacks. We're all more aware of it, and we're more really concerned about sharing personal information online. And we all understand the benefits of being able to do that. You go online, you log into Amazon, you look at their catalog, you find something you want to order, you enter your credit card information, and 3 days later, something is delivered to your doorstep. That's sharing personal information, but there's a benefit to that. And it's a big benefit, it's a big convenience. And people understand that. But this was what you're seeing on your screen is a study that was conducted by the Pew Center in 2019, which I use in all of my talks. And it's very relevant. But there's one big number that should jump off the screen for you, and that's number 2. 81%, 4 out of 5 Americans believe that the risks of collecting data about them outweigh the benefits. They're realizing that I'm really not comfortable with, sharing too much information. Maybe I have to in certain situations, but if I can avoid it, I'm going to certainly try. And they're uncomfortable and they're unhappy. And they frankly don't trust businesses to take the necessary steps to secure that data as strongly as they should. And if you notice here, they trust private industry a lot less than they trust the government. The government is better at protecting their data than private businesses, which I think is very interesting. So you step back and realize that people are concerned about this whole issue, and it's only going to get worse for a variety of reasons. There's another element in all of this, and that is cybersecurity and the danger of being hacked, whether you're an individual or you are a business. It's a constant effort. And I want you to be aware of a term that you may have read about. called Worm GPT. Now, Worm GPT is basically Chat GPT. It was not developed by OpenAI that developed Chat GPT, but it works the same way. And it was designed for use by cyber crooks. And it gives artificial intelligence, gives them the tools to make attacks easier and more numerous. So if you're getting phishing emails today, all of a sudden you're going to get not 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 every month. It's more likely you're going to see 100 or 200 or 1,000 every month, because all a cyber crook has to do is press a button and deploy a lot more of these phishing campaigns. And these phishing campaigns are going to get a lot more sophisticated because they're going to be developed using the logos of the vendors you use. It'll be the information, the language, the words that are used in these campaigns will be very similar or almost identical to the ones you would typically see from a particular vendor. You know how somebody talks and how they write emails. Well, you're going to get something that's going to look awfully familiar. And by all rights, you shouldn't have any concern about, is this legitimate or not? And again, AI is enabling not just a few attacks, but millions of attacks at the push of a button. Now, the good news, if you could call it that, is that artificial intelligence is now being used to thwart these new attacks. But as you might expect, it's always going to be a cat and mouse game where one side gains an advantage one day and the other side finds a way to overcome it. It's going to be just a constant battle, and that's just the way it is. So it's important for everybody to take it seriously. And that's why AI and cybersecurity are so much joined at the hip. Now, let's move on to regulation. Everybody's been talking about this. They're all concerned about AI and what it means, and can we stop it? And there have been proposals for what we call blunt force solutions, and that means, well, we'll just stop AI. We'll just block it. We'll pause it for 6 months. Well, that's not going to happen. That's unrealistic. The crooks already have it. So, if the good guys stop it, it's not going to stop the bad guys. So take that one off the table. Then the question becomes, to what extent is the federal government going to be in a position to regulate it, and to what extent? And I would argue what's passed is prologue. What do I mean by that? It's been 25 years since the internet was introduced in a wide way, and we've yet to see any federal regulation on that score. Now, there have been talks about it, but nothing really definitive. And I would think the same is probably true here. Now, there was a meeting last week at the White House, and a number of the leaders, developers of AI came together and agreed to some voluntary recommendations, voluntary steps, and that's a good thing. How extensive that will be, only time will tell. The insurance industry is regulated not by the federal government, by the individual states. And they will start addressing this in some way. And it's important from an insurance standpoint, and this is true for other industries that handle personal data, that handling customer information demands a greater level of care. So we may see on the state level some regulation, but again, if you're handling personal information, if you're a business that is taking credit card numbers, or you are storing information in one form or another, you've got to take extra care to make sure that data is secured. And I would argue that ultimately the most effective regulation may turn out to be self-regulation. And what I mean by that is that if data is being mishandled by a particular business, they may get sued. If that information is released, or the information that you develop using ChatGPT turns out to be incorrect. And so that should be uppermost in your mind, is how are we using ChatGPT? How are we protecting the data we have? And how protected will we be if we're sued? I've seen information from insurance companies saying they will deny coverage in certain situations. So that's another issue that has to be addressed. The biggest thing that we need to all do in working with artificial intelligence tools is to build digital trust. It's an absolute must. It's critical. And why is it critical? Because we all gather data. AI is dependent on massive amounts of data. And access to consumer data enables insurance companies and other companies to better understand their situation. In the insurance company's case, it's to understand the risks more accurately and be able to price it more accurately. But when it's difficult sometimes to distinguish the real from the fake, how can trust be won? And at the top of that list has to be transparency. Bring customers along for the ride. There's a big difference between what businesses think is important to build digital trust and what matters to consumers, including a sense of purpose, incentives, and ease of use. Why are you using this information? Why are you using these new systems? What are you doing with this data? How are you deploying it? What benefits are we going to see as a result of your use? All of that needs to be on the table so that consumers will understand how you as a company is working with these new tools. There's already a lot of angst, in large part because these new tools were introduced so quickly and it seems like the world was caving in. And that's not really the case, but it's important to bring the consumers along and keep them informed on a real-time basis. Now, these thoughts about digital trust aren't my own entirely. I agree with them wholeheartedly, but I have to give credit to the folks at Swiss Re, which is a Zurich-based reinsurance company that is one of the world's largest. And I've had the privilege of working with many of them over the many years, and they are top notch. And I love this quote from Swiss Re from their report on digital trust. Trust in an AI system lies in understanding how it uses the data to reach fair and ethical decision-making without compromising on human dignity. To me, that says it all. So how can all of us, how is the industry, but how can all of us ride this AI wave, if you will? The first is you embrace it. You are not going to be replaced in all likelihood by AI, but more likely you'll be replaced by someone who knows what to do with it. That also means that you have to, more than ever, prioritize the soft skills. People want to be touched emotionally. Empathy, kindness, friendliness. It might sound like a cliche, but in fact, it is anything but. AI can't replicate everything. And as we've talked about, there are some people that believe that AI will never be able to do certain things. If you ask in the insurance business, ask the owner of a small business, would you get a better policy by going to Chat GPT and entering some numbers, or to go to a human who's been your trusted agents for years, can answer your questions, lower the stress level, and walk you through a policy that's been customized to your business, your risk profile, and your budget. Think of the agent rushing out to a policyholder whose house had just been hit by a tornado. And I've seen that in action. In a hurricane, 24 hours after the hurricane had passed through and the law enforcement had opened up the area for insurance companies and agents and adjusters to come in and start the claims process. There was an example of one particular agent who had a check in hand for some basic living expenses, and walked up to the door of the house, which was somewhat still there, but heavily damaged. And the policyholder answered the door, and he took one look at the agent and just broke into tears. Well, AI can't replicate that, and probably never will. Think of the doctor who can empathize with a patient going through a difficult disease. A teacher who works with a child struggling to learn math, who encourages them and ultimately succeeds in getting the student to understand a difficult concept. I want to leave you with some final takeaways here. First, what we don't know about artificial intelligence far exceeds what we do know. The toothpaste is already out of the tube and it's not going back in the tube. So we're going to have to figure out a way how to work with artificial intelligence, to understand its weaknesses and its strengths, and operate accordingly. Artificial intelligence may not put you out of a job. It will some. But in everybody's case, it will change how you do your job. And I would ask the questions of each of you. What aspects of your current job might AI do better, if not now, then in the near future? AI is very good at information processing, just the raw, analysis. How can AI be used to do that better, and what's left that you can do better? So I would ask you the second question to this, which is, what can you do to accentuate those uniquely human qualities that AI cannot replicate? How can you emotionally touch a longtime customer or one who's just shopping? These are not easy questions to answer, but the conversation has to start now. I'll leave you with one last quote, which I really was struck by. And Rocket Referrals is a company that is a sort of a lead generation software in the insurance industry. But my experience said that Carl is spot on this. Customer behavior is moving toward genuine relationships and away from faceless automation. And I would argue the operative word in that quote is faceless. People want to have connections, face-to-face connections. They want to be able to feel like there's an actual human on the other end who really cares about what they're doing or not doing. And artificial intelligence can address some of the hard skills, but not the soft skills. And that's where all of us need to do a far better job than we ever thought possible. But that's where we are. I'm all talked out. Appreciate your attention here. And now I'm hoping we get a lot of questions. So take it away, Kaylee.
All right. Well, thank you, Tom. Again, reminder to those in the audience viewing today, you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen or maybe on the side, depending on how your screen looks, to enter any of your questions, and we will answer as many as we can get to here. So the first one that came in here says, I work in an environment very dependent on business intelligence. I see lines blurring between BI and AI. Do you see a merger of two concepts, or will they remain distinctively different?
Now, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure he's mixing the two. I mean, research is, we all use research, well, do statistical analysis. Artificial intelligence enables us to do it a lot faster. It won't necessarily do the research. It maybe eventually it can, but you still have to have the raw numbers to be able to analyze. And the question is, who's doing the analyzing? An individual or a system of some kind? I don't know if that answers the question. I mean, they're related, obviously.
No, thank you. That's helpful. Okay, can you also talk a little bit more about what regulations are in place for the use of AI in the business sector?
There aren't any, in effect, not yet. I mean, but as I alluded to, I think we may be moving, we may have get some regulation on the federal level. I'm skeptical of that. Certainly full transparency would nice to be able to tell when something is being generated by AI as opposed to a human. I think that might be something, watermark something that you see. Obviously, there's a lot of opportunity for what's fake and what's real, and I want to know that. But I would argue that the more effective regulation might end up being, I'm not necessarily predicting this, but self-regulation, because people are going to sue each other for one thing or another. In the insurance business, there's something called errors and omissions policies. I suspect that we're going to see E&O claims. Somebody who has used ChatGPT to develop some research. We've already seen that in the legal profession. Companies are saying, if you use ChatGPT and the information is wrong, and you file a claim, we're going to deny it because it can't be relied on. So I think we're going to all have to regulate to a certain extent, not unlike what we do in social media. The idea is, in social media, think before you post. And I think a version of that will develop in various industries. At least I hope so. We do need it. There's no question we do need regulation, but the fact of the matter is we really don't have it yet.
I think this is a really interesting one. Presently, we are seeing the Screen Actors Guild Award, or the SAG Awards, strike against the use of AI, particularly when using their face or likeness. Do you think we'll see other industries strike the use of artificial intelligence?
Yes, the short answer. I think that whole discussion that SAG and AFTRA are having is a relevant one. And they're talking about, the concern is, we're going to have residuals, down the road, because AI can only analyze what's already there. They're not developing it on its own. And so some of them are making the argument that, if I'm going to use AI to produce a new movie, but in order to do that, they have to upload all the movies that have come before. Well, the people who made those movies, not just the actors, but the writers and the lighting people and the makeup artists and everybody else, should have a piece of that pie, because they were responsible for providing the enable the data to be analyzed by these new tools. And I think that's an element, that's a real interesting challenge that they've put their finger on. And I would argue that I suspect we will see other industries reacting the same way, trying to figure out how can humans benefit from AI in a monetary way, and not just, well, we're going to have AI do something because we can. I mean, I would argue AI can't write a hit song. Somebody's got to come up with the idea, and somebody has to be able to imbue that song with some pathos, some humanity. Well, AI can't do that. They're mechanical. That's a deeper question than we have time for, but
yeah. This one is more of a shout out. It just says, your explanations have been very helpful. Thank you so much. I teach private music lessons and have been contemplating using AI to write class descriptions. You have eased some of my thoughts and have helped me realize it's okay to use this tool that's available to me.
Yeah. And I would say it can be a help, but you all obviously, what you can't do is, okay, I'm going to use this system and it's going to produce something and then not look at it. You had to, what is it giving you? And then look at it and saying, does this make sense? Is this accurate? If it's making citations, are those accurate? Are they actually if they're quoting a composer, for example, did the composer actually say that? Or did AI just pick up something that somebody said that they thought maybe the composer said at some point? So due diligence is absolutely critical in that. But yeah, it can help.
Okay, this one is very open-ended, but what do you think the next big trend in artificial intelligence is or will be, in your opinion?
To be honest, I don't have a clue. And the reason is because all the developers of AI have essentially said the same thing. They don't even know how AI works in a large measure. They can't tell you ChatGPT works in this way because they don't know. They know it does what it does, but how they do it, they're not sure about. And the current version of ChatGPT is 4. And I've heard predictions that 5 may be years away, that we won't see another version of it for 5 years, 10 years, I don't know. So it's hard to really say with any kind of certainty what the next level will be. I think it's a learning process for all of us.
No, definitely. And conversations like these only become more important as we get deeper into the thought process of it. Okay. Also to the same token, and I think I kind of know where your answer is going to go with this one. But is there a ceiling on what artificial intelligence can do or what it will become?
Again, I don't know what the ceiling will be, and I don't think anybody knows what the ceiling will be. It certainly has almost unlimited potential. There's no question about that. But where it'll be in 25 years or 50 years, 100 years, your guess is as good as mine. I think we understand the process of its evolution is going to be absolutely critical. And that's having conversations like we're having, making sure that we understand what it can and cannot do right now, and be open to changes as they develop and to be able to react to those changes in real time.
Let me check here, make sure I haven't missed anyone. We're getting quite a few comments in, not necessarily questions, but I'll read a couple here that have come through. It seems that you have carved out human interactions and emotions as a limitation of AI. This attendee says, I might also consider adding innovation and creativity to the list. Machine learning essentially uses historical information to make predictions under the idea that history repeats itself. History does not repeat itself when a human innovates and takes us in a new direction that no one had thought of before.
I would totally agree with that. And creativity, I should have put that in the slide, but true creativity, I would argue AI is not capable of handling, at least not yet. And to what degree, will AI ever come up with Beethoven's Fifth Symphony? I would tend to doubt that.
Yeah. Alrighty, I have one more comment here, and then we are getting close to time. So I encourage you to submit anything one last time if you have it. But this is from an anonymous attendee. We are very worried about it in a medical school where I work. ChatGPT is testing extremely well on medical board exams, and the main concern is that students would use ChatGPT to get through medical school, but not necessarily have the medical knowledge to actually practice medicine.
I would totally agree with that. And that was the point I was trying to make, was that you cannot rely on ChatGPT to do the work for you. And if you do, and I would argue that certainly Wesleyan's guidelines say as much. And I would suspect that medical schools will do the same thing. They'll figure out a way to make sure, do you really understand this material? Or are you just parroting what ChatGPT told you? And they'll figure out ways to be able to flag that. And one of the ways would be to actually have, a conversation, a face-to-face conversation, in an exam. Okay, how would you handle this situation? Don't look at your ChatGPT. You tell me, how to handle that.
Yeah.
What's the procedure? And if they start stumbling, yeah, that's a good way to flag that kind of thing, I think.
Well, Tom, we are at the end of our time here. And I just want to thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to share with us today. Again, for those who potentially have other questions or maybe want to ask them one-on-one, Tom has listed his email here on this slide. So feel free to jot that down. And again, as a reminder, we will be sending the recording of this Titan Talk along with a short survey straight to your email inboxes tomorrow. So feel free to share that with others who may be interested in this topic. Thank you all so much for attending, for asking great questions. Our next Titan Talk is on August 30th, which will be a part of our innovation series. And so I hope you will join in for that one. And in the meantime, have a wonderful day, and we will see you in August. Goodbye, everyone.